Hello, everyone. I am Ahmet Köroğlu. I am working as assistant professor at Istanbul University. With this, I am board member of İLEM, Scientific Studies Association, and the coordinator of İLEM Istanbul Talks. Today, I would like to briefly address you as my İLEM Istanbul Talks coordinator, Bey. As İLEM Talks, we are running our first program today. It's a very special day for us. Therefore, we have a different excitement as in all new beginnings. I hope these talks and this new concept will bring very good future for all academy and humanity. As for İLEM, more than 20 years, İLEM conducted many academic and scientific studies throughout Turkey. In this long process, many national and international organizations such as symposiums, panels, seminars were organized by İLEM successfully. These were followed by many competent academic publications and products as well. Some of these works and projects were the first and outstanding ones in their own fields. And some of them exemplified and was followed with a special interest. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to express that we are very satisfied about this. İLEM, for more than 20 years, did not keep these works is limited to the territory within Turkey only. We have also made an effort to do a lot of projects for the international academic community. If it is necessary to cite some of these projects that stand out from all these, maybe the first one is İLEM International Summer School. I am head of the organizing committee as well. And this year will be the 7th one, and on July, and the topic will be Muslim identity. In every year, we are organizing İLEM Summer School, and many scholars are giving some lectures in these summer schools. And the other one, Islamic academic workshops, International Student Social Science Congress, and some partnerships with international with STT MENA project, and also organized many symposiums like Political Climate of Muslim World, Beyond Eurocentrism, and based on civilization understandings, etc. And now, as a last attempt, İLEM Istanbul Talks, we are willing to share our own intellectual experience with academics, researchers, and intellectuals from different geographies, and to benefit from their experiences. For this, we want to start a new talk series with the name of İLEM Istanbul Talks. And we aim that with these İLEM Istanbul Talks will help us to communicate and cooperate better with international organizations, academicians, and some academic institutions. The talks will be interactive, based on dialogue rather than monologue conversations, and there will be Q&A part at the end of the program, and we offer the participant an opportunity to give their questions or to make some comments or contributions. And now let's come our speaker and moderator. Please allow me to introduce the moderator and the respected speaker now. Firstly, our moderator, Hatice Nuriler. Hatice Nuriler has been working with the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT, which publishes books in Islamic and social studies and organized education programs for graduate students in several countries, including in Turkey. Hatice is also coordinating the Turkey Future Studies workshop series that IIIT and Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies co-organize every year. She has a bachelor degree in English literature and master degree in culture studies. Currently, she is PhD student in sociology department, focusing on sociology of higher education. And our respected speaker, Ziauddin Sardar, he was born in Pakistan and grew up in Hackney. A writer, broadcaster, and cultural critic, he is one of the world's foremost Muslim intellectuals and author of more than 50 books about Islam, science, and contemporary culture. He has been listed by Prospect magazine as one of Britain's top 100 intellectuals. Currently, he is director of Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies at East-West University, Chicago, and co-editor of the Quarterly Critical Muslim, consulting editor of Futures. This is a monthly journal on policy, planning, and future studies, and chair of the Muslim Institute in London. Please welcome Professor Ziauddin Sardar and Hatice Nuriler.
Thanks so much, Dr. Ahmed. I would like to thank İLEM for this program and for inviting me as the moderator. And Professor Zia.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you? How is everybody?
Alhamdulillah, we are keeping well. I think we are ready to start.
Mm-hmm.
And before we delve into our subject, I just wanted to catch up with you. How is the situation in the UK relating to the COVID and the pandemic? We heard some positive news about the UK, the situation in the UK.
Yes, it looks like the situation here is improving. Over half the population has been vaccinated. It's almost everybody over 50, which means that both the death rates and the infection rates are going down. The lockdown has been eased. Finally, we are able to get out of our house and we can, 6 people can meet outside. And hopefully next week, in the next couple of weeks, shops will also open. So things are looking up. At the moment, we are very worried about Europe, where this third wave is about to hit, and people are concerned that that wave is going to wash, in our direction.
Other countries as well. This is encouraging, although still we have, as the globe, a long way to go. Inshallah, we will soon be able to do our programs in person. So,
yes, I'm hoping so. I'm hoping within the next few months we can meet face to face and have these conversations directly. Hatice, your mic is. Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I was saying your first destination after the lockdown should be Turkey.
It definitely will be Istanbul. I'm coming as soon as I can.
Inshallah. Okay, now we come to the title of your talk, which is Postnormal Times in Muslim Societies. Mm-hmm. And those who follow your work closely, of course, will be very familiar about the future studies and postnormal times theory. But for those who don't know about it, could you please elaborate what is postnormal times and what do you mean by postnormal, and about when we say what is normal and what is postnormal? So in short, what is postnormal times?
Well, postnormal times is basically two things. It's a theory of change. It's an attempt to understand the changing nature of change, and it's also a description of the world as it is at the moment. So if you think about how things have changed, say, over the last 10, 15 years, it's not just that things are changing, but the change is accelerating. And the nature of change itself is changing. So the postnormal times is an attempt to actually understand change, see what we can do to navigate this kind of accelerating change. And at the same time, it's a description of the world as it exists at the moment. Now, the official definition of postnormal times is that it's an in-between period where the old orthodoxies and old paradigms are dying, but the new ones have not yet emerged. So we are we are kind of hanging between no longer and not yet. So it's a transitional period where what we took for granted, whatever we understood as normal, either doesn't work or is becoming more and more problematic. But we don't have new solutions, new ideas, new paradigms, and we're stuck in the in-between. So it's an in-between period. It's not the end period, but it's a transitional period. That's what post-normal times supposed to represent. So what is normal and what is post-normal? Well, almost anything you take for granted that worked is normal. So we took capitalism as normal. Capitalism always worked. It delivered. Free market supposed to deliver. But we now know that capitalism is not delivering. That instead of doing something about inequality, as we now understand from the work of Thomas Piketty, that over the last century, capitalism has systematically increased inequalities. Right, the markets are not delivering. Few corporations aggregate more and more wealth and power. Vast majority of people remain poor. In fact, the disparity between rich and poor has increased. Power is shifting. Conventionally, we considered the United States to be the policeman of the world. Before that, we're supposed to have bipolar world. Then we move into monopolar world with the United States as the sole superpower. But now the power is transforming from east to west. And we don't just have unipolar or bipolar, but a economic and political power. India, Turkey, there are lots of Russia, there are lots of power centers. So in fact, almost each of these countries can claim to be a superpower in themselves. So we are moving towards a multipolar world, which creates its own dynamics. For example, we thought in Europe that fascism has died. That was the normal position. That after the Second World War, the whole creation of the European Union was about this is never going to happen in Europe again. After the Holocaust, this is never going to happen again. Yet fascism has come back, and has come back in a very, very big way, in a sense. So it doesn't really matter how you define normal, and there are very many different definitions of normal. And some people will even argue that there's no such thing as a normal. But the point is this: whatever you regarded as conventional, or whatever you thought will work, whether it's in politics or in economics or in social relationships or in international relations, does not work anymore. So we're going to move beyond the normal, and we are in a post-normal world. Take, for example, the notion of truth. We have always regarded truth as absolute. But now we are in a world which insists or describes itself as post-truth, right? So what was the anchor for us now has become totally and utterly relative. And there are certain other things that have never happened in history before, which are happening now. For example, never in history, human activities could transform the geology and ecology of the earth. The geologists call this a new era, the Anthropocene, where human activities have a major impact on the ecology and the geology of the planet itself. That has never happened in history. Instant communication. You now, with a single tweet, can communicate to millions of people instantly. That level of communication has never happened before. There have been globalizations before, but the kind of interconnection that we have nowadays with social media, 24-hour television, all sorts of modern equipment, the interconnection that we have, and interdependence that we have, has never existed before. That's a unique thing. And certain things like in science and technology, for example, we can now engineer to change ourselves. Bioengineering has advanced so much that we can edit DNA, we can transform our own biology, and to a very large extent, this means we are trying to change of our own humanity. What does it mean to be human anymore in a world of bioengineering and cyborgs and so on and so forth? So that's something that has never happened before. And of course, we've never had something like artificial intelligence, an intelligence that is outside the human being, that is exceptionally powerful and can have major impact on us. So all these new developments as well, which are unique in history, make this a very different period from previous periods. So this is what we describe as post-normal times. Yeah, a period where all the stuff that was normal is melting away, right? And we do not know. We are continuously in a position of uncertainty and ignorance and grasping. We don't trust anything. We don't trust the politicians. We don't trust ourselves. There's divisions in society. So it's a unique period in history. This is why we use the description post-normal times. But at the same time, post-normal times, as I said earlier on, is also a theory of change. It's a way of understanding change and the changing nature of change.
Yeah, just at this point, I would like to add a follow-up question actually to this, just to clarify the position of like what post-normal is amongst many other endeavors to define the times we are in. For instance, we have postmodernity or postmodern times also, or yeah. If we like draw on some sociological thinking, Bauman has described
liquid modernity. Yeah.
Modernity. And there are many descriptions like that, and also, as you said, post-truth. And also, what is normal does not matter anymore, and the basic assumption of that there is one truth, one reality is disregarded in our time. So that's an interesting point you made also. So how do you distinguish post-normal from postmodern, especially?
I think the first thing to do is to try and distinguish post-normal from postmodern. Postmodernism was a philosophy, and indeed a philosophy of life, as well as an attempt to describe the world as it existed in 1980s, 1990s, and the noughties. One of the basic features of postmodernism was, or basic component of postmodern philosophy was, that grand narratives are meaningless. What did they mean by grand narratives? Grand narratives is anything that gives you meaning to your life. So Islam is a grand narrative for Muslims, right? Science is a grand narrative. Marxism is a grand narrative. History, tradition, these are all grand narratives. Anything that are broad sweeps which provide sense of direction, meaning and sense of direction. And this was the kind of key assumption of postmodernism. The grand narratives are meaningless. Now we know that that is absolutely not true. Grand narratives have come back in a big way, in a sense. There were other aspects of postmodernism as well. Some good and some not so good. But the main point is that if grand narratives are meaningless, then there is no such thing as absolute truth. And in fact, postmodernism was very much an attack on truth. So we are living to some extent as in a legacy of postmodernism, in the sense that truth has become almost relative now, that everything is relative, all truth is relative. That's very much a product of postmodernism. Right, and the idea and the other idea is that image and reality are interlinked. I mean, that's also a kind of a postmodern kind of assumption, which is becoming more and more true as well, in a sense. But unlike postmodernism, the post-normal times theory is not a philosophy of life. It is simply a description of the world, an attempt at a description at the world as it exists today, and an attempt to understand how things change, what's happening to change itself, why is it accelerating. So there are two quite distinct, quite different things. Postmodernism was a worldview. Post-normal times, as I said, is a theory of change, in a sense. So that's the first thing. And in my view, postmodernism is more or less passé now. It's dead. I mean, there are hardly any self-respecting postmodernists out there. But there have been many attempts to understand change and what is going on. As you point out, Zygmunt Bauman had the idea of liquid modernity, right? Because he was trying to grasp what is going on. That modernity itself has become fluid. You know, you cannot kind of pin it down in that sense. But there are other ideas. I mean, the new book by Susanna Zuboff describes modern times as the age of surveillance capitalism. American technology writer James Berder describes it as the age of darkness. Alan Curtis, a very famous British documentary maker, calls it hypernormalization. So there are many attempts to describe what is going on, what is happening to change, and what is happening to the world. Yeah, and all of these are true. We do live in a hyper-normalized world. We are, to some extent, in a dark ages. If you look at what was going on under Trump in America, it does suggest that we live in dark. And we certainly are living in a surveillance capitalist society. So all of these are true. But you do remember the famous kind of Sufi story of the elephant and the blind man, that all of these aspects represent one particular, all of these attempts to understand what is going on in the world represent one particular aspect of the reality. And what Postnormal Times theory does is to step back and look at it collectively, right? So it's a much broader sweep in the sense of postmodern Times theory. This has been described as macro history. In a sense, it takes a macro view. It's not just looking at capitalism. It's not just looking at fascism. It's not just looking at what's happening in terms of modernity or in terms of global weirdness, as Thomas Friedman, the American right-wing economist, describes the world as global weirdness. It's taking all of this collectively and looking at it in a much broader sense. So the Postnormal Times theory then attempts to look at the elephant itself from a distance, if you like, and incorporates all of these different views of change. So that's the kind of key thing that I think one needs to appreciate.
Thank you so much. And just at that point, I would like to go much deeper into the features of postnormal theory and postnormal change. Mm. And I know that there are basic terms and conceptualizations that postnormal theory describes the change we are talking about of our current times. Yeah. So how can you elaborate on them? And also just to notify the audience that we will be running some slides just for some visualization of the terminology we are talking about.
Okay, I think the first thing to realize, the first kind of key component of postnormal times is complexity. That the world is becoming more and more complex, right? The more interconnected we become, the more complex we as a society we become, and wherever you look, you see complexity in action. Governance, for example, has become a major problem, right? You cannot really understand different components of government. So most governments are struggling to cope with change. Governance has become, social relations have become complex. Almost everything you touch has become complex, and we need to understand the difference between complexity and things being complicated. I'm not talking about complication. Yeah, complications like. Yeah, when I think of complication, it's like my mother, for example, every year during winter, she will get her box of cotton wool out, right, to knit sweaters, and in absolutely you can guarantee that some of they will have knots, and she will spend hours unknotting them. That's complicated. Complexity is something different. Complexity is when all the different components of a particular system are interlinked and are variable and can change, like the flight of a bird. If you see the flock of this bird, how it moves in unison. So complexity then is in a kind of system. In a complex system, different components are variable and kind of connected and can change rapidly. Yeah. Now, this is, for example, a description, a two-dimensional description of a complex system, and this is all the people involved in the Afghanistan conflict. This was a map that the American general asked a particular company to produce to show the interconnection. Now, this is just a two-dimension representation. Imagine each of these points, all these tribes, people interacting, are changing all the time. It was a three-dimensional moving map, right? This is what a complex system is. And they said that if you understand this map, we will win the war in Afghanistan. But of course, they did not win. They did not win the war, because they did not understand the complexity. So complexity is a different thing. And complex systems are also self-organizing, self-evolving and self-organizing. This, for example, when we look at the pandemic, how quickly the pandemic is spread, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how quickly it became transformed into a complex system where all the components of the different components of the pandemic moved and changed, and they were in a dynamic state all the time. So complexity is one of the kind of key components of post-normal times. When you have complex systems interacting and interconnection, there's a positive feedback. And when you have positive feedback, you get chaos, right? And we've seen numerous examples of chaos from the collapse of the 2008 collapse of the financial system to chaos produced by the pandemic itself. So the second main component of post-normal times, or main feature of post-normal times after complexity, is chaos. That things become chaotic very, very, very, very quickly. Yeah. To understand post-normal times, you have to understand not just complexity, but how complexity very quickly leads to chaotic behavior. Yeah. And when you have chaos, you could have two options: either the system collapses or it emerges in a new order. So that's, I think, the third component of post-normal times is contradictions. So this is an example of chaos during this illustration of chaos during the financial crisis. Well, a more recent example of chaos, of course, is the storming of the Congress in the United States after the general election, which Trump lost. But since we live in post-truth society, he insisted that he has not lost the election. And that where you have lots of a great deal of complexity and chaotic behavior, you will have contradictions. Now, you can have very simple contradictions, like we see here, that this is supposed to be a college for girls, and this is a meeting of the kind of administrators and organizers of the girls' college, right? And there's not a single woman in sight. I mean, you can have a plain contradiction like that.
If I remember well, they were convening to talk about women issues. Right?
Yeah, to talk about women's issue. Yeah, indeed. You can have. I mean, these kind of contradictions are there all the time. But we are now facing very, very deep contradictions. For example, something that I alluded to earlier on. European Union was formed largely because to ensure that fascism does not re-emerge in Europe. Yet the European Union at this moment in time is a kind of incubator of fascism. 1/3 of the MEPs in the European Parliament come from far right parties. You take a country like France, 1/3 of the population systematically votes for a far right party, and in fact, it is projected in the next election, the far right party, Marine Le Pen's party, and Macron's party are almost neck to neck. That means half the population is supporting far right. So here you have a major contradiction. And of course, Europe and NATO go hand in hand. Yet Europe is now buying a vaccine not from America or Britain, but from Russia. Right? This is a very interesting contradiction. One of these two things are banned in all American schools, and I can give you a clue: it's not the gun. It's the Easter egg. The Easter egg is banned because it contains a toy. So when the young children eat the egg, they can swallow the toy, and that can affect, that can suffocate them. So that is banned, but the gun is not banned. I mean, you get lots and lots of contradictions. But now the point is that the contradictions are becoming a major feature of society. Most societies are fragmented because there are contradictory views within them. And the thing about contradictions is that they cannot be resolved. Many of them are simply logical things. They can only be transcended. So post-normal factors. What determines post-normal times are 3 C's: complexity, chaos, and contradictions. So as I was saying, these by focusing on the basic features of change in contemporary times, we are taking a much broader look. We're not just looking at capitalism, because capitalism is just as much, in fact, affected by complexity, chaos, and contradiction as social relations, as politics, as human behavior, as social media, as television, right? So that's, to understand post-normal times, we need to understand these three main features of what we are living through now.
Exactly, and thanks to social media, always, every day there are a few more examples of such contradictions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So these are the major features of post-normal times you explained. And what is driving this kind of change? How can you?
That's a very interesting question, because once you identified, the main features, then the next obvious question is, well, why do we find ourselves in a complex, chaotic, and contradictory world? What is driving this change? So we can call them post-normal change. Yeah, but the first thing to realize, as I said earlier on, is that we live in a world of accelerating change. Speed. You see, things happen with great speed. Right? Yeah, imagine or just think of how quickly COVID-19 is spread. Right? Yeah, within 2-3 months, identified in China. Within 2-3 months, it was all over the world. Right? Things happen at great. Almost everything now moves at a great speed. Even when we are dealing with things, on our mobiles, we reacting with speed. Even human behavior has become more and more speed oriented. So the first characteristic is speed. That almost everything now happens at a great speed. But at the same time, if we stick to the pandemic, we can see that it's not just speed, but the scope is also very important. So things are global in scope. They don't just move rapidly, but they cover the globe very, very quickly. Right? And not just that they cover the globe very, very quickly, they go down in scale to the individual level. right? So here, so we can see the scope. The scope is global. So almost not just that the pandemic spread very, very rapidly with great speed, but it covered the whole globe. And then it goes down to the individual level. So after scope, we have scale. So things go down to the level of the individual, individuals, communities, societies at great depth. So scale is very, very important. Things now happen not just at a global level, but but also at a local and individual level. And finally, they happen simultaneously. So it's not just that one particular country was affected. It was simultaneously throughout the globe, right? I've given the example of COVID-19, but we can look at lots of different phenomena which actually moves in the same way. So the driving force of post-normal change is speed, scope, scale, and simultaneity, right? Things happen at a number of different fronts. So the pandemic was not just a problem of health. It was also a problem of economics. It was also a problem of delivering food to people who did not have enough to eat. It was also a problem of travel, because travel was stopped. It was also a problem of time, because the clock kept ticking, but the time stopped. You were confined to your house. So you were faced with simultaneously a number of different problems. This is what Ban Ki-moon, the former General Secretary of the United Nations, he pointed out that what is unique about contemporary time is not just that we are facing crisis, because new societies throughout history, societies have faced crisis, but that we are facing crisis that appear simultaneously on a number of different fronts. So a single crisis often breaks down and comes as on a number of different levels. So post-normal change is a result of speed, scope, scale, and simultaneity. That's what takes us to complexity, contradictions, and chaos.
So I think these are very useful basic terminology to describe the picture we are in right now. But also, we would like to hear from you about the practical dimensions of this. So, yes, we have this very complicated, chaotic, and complex picture in front of us. But how do we deal with it? Are there any tools and strategies and methods that can be used to better understand and explicate our times?
Yeah, I mean that the function of any theory is not just to describe what is going on, but also to suggest what we can do about it. So post-normal times theory has a number of tools to actually work out what is going on. So, for example, in terms of post-normal phenomena, when the post-normal phenomena is emerging, there are 4 different stages that we need to tackle. And each stage may require a policy option. So the first stage of post-normal phenomena may be simple denial that this post-normal that the phenomena just doesn't exist. This is what we call post-normal lag. Right. Then when things begin to develop, I mean, in the case of the pandemic, when it was there in China, people said, "Oh, it's just a Chinese problem. It is not our problem. It's not going to be here. It won't be affecting." That's the lag, right? In that sense, and you need policies to handle the lag. So in America, for example, there are lots of people who are climate deniers. There are lots of people now who are deniers of anti-vaxxers. So you need policies to handle that. Then when the phenomena begins to develop, we refer to as post-normal creep. It starts to creep. So from China, the pandemic is spread to the nearby countries, to Southeast Asia, to South Asia, right? So that's the creep. Now that's once you reach that, once you can notice the creep, then you are aware of, then you should be aware that something is coming your way, and therefore you have to develop policies or prepare yourself for the change that is coming. How do you actually deal with it? And then when the phenomena gets very close to you, we call it postnormal tilt. That's when the forces are tilting, and you can see that over the horizon, could be days, could be months, could be years, you are going to be engulfed by postnormal change. And finally, when the postnormal phenomena arrives, you have a bust. So it's a kind of a mechanism to understand how things change very, very rapidly. And you have to develop policies for each stage, in a sense. So there's a kind of policy tool. We have also a number of other methods. We have one of the important aspects of postnormal times is impact on Muslim societies. How is it going to change and affect the Muslim societies? For us, especially, those who are concerned about the future, Muslim futures. And one of its aspects is that a lot of what is happening nowadays could actually be used to recolonize the Muslim societies, or more appropriately, to colonize their future. Right. So we have the methodology of the 3 tomorrows, where we show that the future is not something that is going to unfold in a linear fashion anymore. It does to some extent unfolds in a linear fashion, but essentially it's not really a future. It's what we call the extended present. That it continues. We know that there's Apple 12 has just been released. Next year there's going to be Apple 13 and Apple 14, and certain technologies will develop. So that's not really taking us to a future. That's simply the present extended onto the future, right? And then there's the familiar future. The second tomorrow, what we call the familiar futures, where the images that we imbibe, the images from films and television and advertisement, books, etc., of the future that we have kind of incorporated. So the second tomorrow is familiar future. It's the future that we project because of the images that we carry with us of the future, right? And the third tomorrow is the unthought future. That's the future which is not unthinkable, but is unthought largely because we have not moved out of the paradigms within which we operate. So, for example, there's a very famous saying that it is easier to think of the end of the world than to think about an alternative to capitalism. Why? Because capitalism is the paradigm we are working through. So we are in this box called capitalism, and we have to think outside what is going on in this. We are stuck in this room, capitalist room. We don't know. That's the unthought, in a sense, and the emphasis has to be on the unthought. If you want to get out of the kind of situation you find yourself in post-normal times, you have to move more and more towards the unthought. So post-normal times also presents us with a challenge. If the old orthodoxies are falling and the old paradigms are not working, there's a challenge that we can create new paradigms ourselves. Right. Certain disciplines are just not working. Economics, good example. Sociology has now been weaponized. Most of the conventional disciplines exist in silos, and we know that in an interconnected, complex world, you need complex approaches to complex problems, and individual disciplines cannot solve these problems. So the individual disciplines themselves are becoming irrelevant. So all that means there are challenges out there, there are opportunities for us to create new disciplines, for us to create new ideas, new paradigms. And bring our own values and concerns and requirements and ethics into play. At the moment, of course, Muslims are just passive receivers of all that is happening around the world. But with the help, if you start creating our own paradigms, then we can actually not just be part of a changing world, but help change the world itself.
Dr. Zia, I will ask you to elaborate a little bit on some points that you just mentioned, but before I do so, just an announcement for the audience. I'm almost finished with my questions because we want to spare some time for audience.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on and let other people ask some questions, I think. Yeah,
please write down your questions on the comment sections and we will try to accommodate them all if time allows us, of course. One thing that you just mentioned, colonizing the future. I know that it is related, but a little bit different from what we understand from colonization. So, how can be future colonized? How can future be decolonized in that case?
Yeah, this is interesting. Most people find it very difficult to understand. It is important to appreciate that colonization is not something that only existed in history. Yeah. Colonization is something that exists in the present and could be used to colonize your future. And there are a number of ways number of ways that the future can be colonized. One is what I just described as an extended present. So if you take the present as it exists today with all its inequalities, all the structures of domination that are there, right? And all the marginalized people that exist, and you just project that into the future, extended present, then you are in a way colonizing the future, right? So that's what's the best way to describe that? I mean, that essentially means that the kind of present you find yourself in continues into the future, but with added gadgets and few changes here and there, right? So that's kind of, if you like, one way future is colonized. The second way the future can be colonized is by creating desires. By creating desires that force you to move in a certain direction. Yeah. By giving you images and providing you with metaphors that are embedded in certain worldviews. And then you want to realize those images. You want to bring those images into your own life. You want to shape the future according to those images. That's another way of colonizing the future. So there are a number of different ways of colonizing the future. And what we try to do in Postnormal Times work is to actually point out to people that, look, if you are working in certain paradigms that are collapsing, yet you continue to hold those paradigms, that means you're simply extending the present into the future. And you will continue to be colonized the way you are colonized at this moment in time. I hope that's a bit more, that's slightly more clear.
Yes, it is clear a little bit, but of course it always lends more definition, more clarification than more complications than questions.
Yeah.
So, one comment, and also related to a question that I wanted to ask you about what you just said, is that our title is Postnormal Muslim Societies in Postnormal Times, and you also just mentioned that Muslims are just passive receivers recently and so on. And one of our audience says that we are basically living under the same time, like he called it capitalist times. So it describes ourselves as Muslims in such a way of living in the world condition. So I want to come from there to a question of this. if you will, like the division of West and East, or Western and Muslim. So how do you approach this this dualism or dichotomy?
I think, first of all, what Postnormal Times theory teaches us is that dichotomies don't work anymore. You see, because dichotomies often turn into contradictions, and then we find ourselves that we cannot resolve contradictions. So the whole exercise has to be that we have to rise above contradictions. So in a contemporary, so the first thing I will say that the Muslims should not think of themselves simply as Muslims, because we are part of a planetary world, right? What happens elsewhere may have direct consequences for us, right? So we have to pay attention to elsewhere as well, right? And also, our worldview teaches us to be part of a global humanity, right? This is the essential. Islam is universal. That means we are everywhere. Right, we are everywhere, and everywhere concerns us, and everywhere concerns us. That's what universal means, right? And everyone, everywhere concerns us, right? So we shouldn't see ourselves in terms of East and West anymore, because in postnormal times we are all going to suffer when the paradigms collapse, right? So it's a challenge for all of us. But certain things will have more direct impact on Muslim societies. To begin with, you take climate change, for example, right? The Muslim world was often described as the global middle belt, right? That, in fact, Muslim societies describe themselves as global middle belt, the equatorial belt. We go from Morocco, extend from Morocco all the way to Indonesia. And this is the global belt, which is going to suffer most initially from climate change, right? So imagine sea level rises. So the Maldives, for example, will totally disappear in 10, 20 years. Jakarta is sinking, right? So they're going to move Jakarta from Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, from Jakarta to Borneo, right? Within the next 10 years. Imagine what sea level rises will do to the delta in Bangladesh, right? And temperature rises. Last year, the temperature in Karachi was 49 degrees. In a city in southern Iran, temperature reached something like 53, 54 degrees, which is almost inhuman. At this moment in time, 2 out of 3 all refugees are Muslims. Within the next 20 years, 4 out of 5 refugees in the world will be Muslims. And the new refugees will be what we call environmental refugees. These will be the refugees who cannot live in their cities, in their countries anymore. Where will the Maldives go when the Maldives sinks? What will happen to the population of, say, Karachi or Cairo or places like that when the temperature rises to 50, 55, 60 degrees, right? Water scarcity. Of all the countries in the world, one of the first countries to be impacted will be on the global middle belt. Pakistan, Egypt, Sudan, these are the countries that will, Turkey, these are the countries that will suffer from serious water shortages, right, within the next 10 years. So even Istanbul may run out of water in the not so distant future. Now, these are the things that we really have to focus on, right? And because they are our problems, although they are global problems, but they are also our problems, and we need to pay attention to them now, right? Otherwise, our future will be lost in a sense. There are other things that I briefly mentioned. I mean, artificial intelligence. Yeah, we know that artificial intelligence is deeply racist and biased. There's so many. I don't even want to go into the examples, because you can just Google and find the examples, right? And we live, as the book on surveillance capitalism tells us, we live in a society where surveillance is the norm, the new norm, if you like. So imagine how artificial intelligence can be used against Muslims to racially profile them. What happened to Uyghurs in China? They were, first of all, they were given free mobile phones, along with all the artificial intelligence and data collection it had. Right, slowly, they were racially profiled systematically, and now they are basically, and we are facing the biggest cultural genocide in recent history of over a million Uyghurs, right, being in internment camp. This would not have been possible without artificial intelligence and surveillance technology. We're talking about Buman earlier on, and one of the books he wrote, apart from Liquid Modernity, was Modernity and Holocaust, in which he argues that the Holocaust would not have been possible without the administrative and technological capability of modernity. So the two are interlinked. Physically, like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, when people fought with swords, you couldn't kill 6 million people. That you needed certain amount of technology and administrative capability to do that. Similarly, what is happening to Uyghurs now could not have happened 20, 30 years ago, because you need the technology, which is the technology of surveillance and artificial intelligence and big data collection. Right, all that has made that possible. That's a very post-normal phenomena. Normally, countries don't do that. I mean, in a sense, there's a contradiction in China as well, because you have a communist country with a kind of naked capitalist economy. You know, total contradiction. The state itself is a contradiction. But then, what the state is doing now, right, would not have been possible without the kind of technology. So we need to be very, very concerned about these issues. That's one of the ways the future is colonized, if you like. And we need to pay attention to that. So a great deal of what's happening in post-normal times will have direct impact on Muslim societies. And in fact, in the book that I think IIIT has published, that is available, can be downloaded, Muslim Societies in Post-Normal Times, Trends, Emerging Issues, and Scenarios. We kind of describe some of the trends that could have an impact on Muslim societies within a post-normal framework. And we also develop some scenarios, potential scenarios. So it's worth, anybody interested in it, it's worth downloading the book and going through it.
I'll try to provide the link to access the book.
But also, for example, whatever I've said, there's a lot of detail. I mean, the Postnormal Times series now has a hell of a lot of literature. Quite a lot of it can be found on the Postnormal Times website. So it's postnormaltim.es. If you just go to the website, you can download lots of stuff from there, papers, books.
Okay, maybe I can provide later to my.
All right, provide the link. Yeah.
Provide for the audience, maybe just below this video recording.
Yeah.
We have some good questions, and also I will try to relate them to what you just said. One is about the consumer as an individual.
Yeah.
Post-normal times theory sees and evaluates the consumer in today's world. I mean, consumer as an individual. Yeah. And thanks for this valuable webinar.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so consumerism is a legacy of postmodernism. So if you like, post-normal times has inherited that. So one of the main kind of unstated goal of postmodernism was to create desire, and create desire for consumerism. Right, in a sense. In my book, Postmodernism and the Other, I argue that while modernity simply occupied our land and our mind, postmodernism was essentially trying to consume us in every possible way. Right, and therefore it was a new, and the subtitle of the book is The New Imperialism of Western Culture, in a sense. So consumerism is a legacy that we have inherited from postmodernism. But what's happening in post-normal times is that it has been accelerated. The desire now, with constant feedbacks and constant advertising and constant kind of attachment to social media. You see, look at the social media. Social media is designed for you to become addicted to it. Every single app you're using is designed for you to be addicted to it. Because that's how it makes its money, right? By more likes or dislikes you click on, the more money that site, that app actually makes. That's the business. That's the business model. So it's designed to get you become addicted to it, and therefore it's designed to increase desire constantly. And the only way to fight that, I mean, if I, for example, I'm not on any social media apart from LinkedIn, even there where I don't post anything, right? If you want to do something about it, the best solution is to not to be attached to any social media. Use the tools for communication only, and avoid, all the intrusion and advertising and the glamour and the color and the 24-hour of feeds that are there that just fill your mind, in a sense. I'm not saying you should become a Luddite, but I am saying that you have to be aware of it and just use it as a tool, but not as opium, which is designed to be, or as cocaine, in fact, is designed to be.
Okay, and just at that point, there are some questions as to what we should be doing. And in that sense, I want to combine two questions we have. One of our young colleagues said that they are quite worried about the future, and that they are feeling like they're losing their integrity as young Muslims.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of what we do. And also we have another question. I see it related to this one also. By Nihat Hoca. And how do you evaluate the readiness to understand and make sense of postnormal change in postnormal times regarding Muslim society?
Yeah. First of all, the two or three things I want to say is, first, that as Muslims we always have hope. Right? As Muslims, we are not allowed to despair. Suicide is forbidden in Islam. Despair is forbidden in Islam, right? So we trust in God and we always have hope, in the sense. But we have to tie our camel, as the Hadith says, right? And the way of tying our camel is to become futures literate, have awareness. The idea that you should only exist for now, right, is a major fallacy. Because whatever you do now has a major impact on your future. For example, if you enroll in a college for a study now, 5-6 years time, you will have a degree, higher qualification, and better employment. So now is very, very important, and all futures work comes down to now, right? In a sense. So if you have future consciousness, then you have to decide what is the best thing I can do now, both to improve my own future, to improve the future of my family, to improve the future of my neighborhood, to improve the future of my community, and improve the future of my city and my nation and my country. And all of these are connected. They are not individual. There is a connection, right? And therefore you have to think in long terms. All reform, all change, positive change takes place in the future. All reform takes place in the future. So you have to be future consciousness. And you have to realize that there is, in future consciousness, there is agency. Not everything in postmodern times is bad, right? For example, now you have more agencies as an individual than individuals have ever had in history. By a single tweet, you can mobilize people. By a single tweet, you can reach thousands, millions of people, influence them. A lot of people have realized that, and they're using it to take us toward chaos. only 17 people were involved in creating the QAnon conspiracy in the United States, which had huge following. There are only 3 or 4 people who actually created the whole COVID-19 vaccination is bad. We can count them in the fingers of hand. Yeah. Why? How did it happen? Because individuals now have greater agency. So instead of allowing other people to use it to take us towards negative futures, towards destructive futures, you have the power to take us towards more positive futures. And networks are very important. Power nowadays, to a great extent, comes from networks. So you need to create networks. Right? A network for changes in the neighborhood, network for changes in the city, network for bringing young people together to discuss and debate ideas and how do we move forward. So if you just look around you, you will find there's a great deal of opportunity. There's a great deal of available out there that can help you transform and change things for the better. And as I said, not everything in Postnormal Times is bad.
You just reminded me of this aphorismic saying. I don't know which culture it is, or it could be a Turkish one as well. It says, future lasts long. And you just said that every change happens in the future. So, and also the issue of agency.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was addressing, the question of agency. We have agency. We have lots and lots of agency, right? But we need to understand that we have. If you don't, the important thing is to realize how things are changing, right? And how we can then navigate this change. And it's the navigation of the change that provides you with agency, right? And I said, there are lots of tools out there that can help you move towards positive change. Yeah, and of course, it's a challenge of creativity as well, of imagination and creativity, which a lot of young people, young scholars have, right? Think of alternative ways of doing local economies. Think of kind of alternative ways of bringing the community together.
And complex change requires adaptation.
Yeah, and remember that complex change requires complex approaches. Right? You need to connect the dots. You need to connect the dots in a sense.
I want to take another question. How do you relate it with Muslim societies?
Well, I've already talked about that.
Yes. Yeah. Can you please give an example relating to the Muslims' religio-cultural phenomena?
Can you please give example relating to the Muslim religio-culture? I'm not quite sure what religio. Well, okay. The question of, you see, one of the things about all this is ethics. So many of the new technologies that are emerging have huge ethical problems, whether it's genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, right? IVFs, wherever you look, many of these technologies have huge ethical problems, right? And they will have direct impact. So when IVF came along, and you could do a little bit of genetic manipulation, and it was introduced in India about almost 10 years now. The first thing they said was, and these were middle and upper class couples in India. The first thing they wanted was, can we have whiter than, can our baby be as white as milk? Right. Now that was 10 years ago or maybe longer. Now those technologies are widely available in Turkey, in Iran, everywhere. Right. It's not just a nose job. You can actually transform what is in your womb. Now this is a major ethical question, right? And we need to address to that. It affects us, our religion and culture directly. If artificial intelligence is systematically biased, right, not just against women, but against people of color and minorities, then that raises major ethical and religious questions for us. In a sense, wherever you look, in terms of what is happening in new innovations, etc., there are major ethical questions. Even in knowledge production, for example, we now know more about space than we know about the oceans. Yet oceans are more important for us for survival, right? So there's a contradiction, but there's also an ethical involvement here. Is that, why is it necessary to know more about space and not enough about the oceans? We need to know about both, but at the moment the priority, why is that there is more research on, say, cancer than diarrhea? It's not that cancer is not important, but diarrhea is important as well, right? More people die of diarrhea than they die of cancer in Muslim societies. So there are ethical questions everywhere, right? And the problem is that we do not think about the ethical dimensions. We simply assume that development has taken place, therefore, it's going to be bringing some benefit, it will be good for us, etc., etc.
And no engineering is kind of engineering per se, but it all has, like, every act has its ontological.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in that sense, everything is ethical, and we have to be sensitive in everything we approach.
Yeah.
In the temporality studies, like how we envision our future. So our time is up.
Yeah.
There are tons of questions and challenges we have to talk about, but I think you have done a great job to cover the basic features and issues that we could fit in 75 minutes. So for me personally, that if I have to summarize in two words, actually, I could say hope and agency.
Yeah.
And these are the basics that we should get from our, in with regards to how we should approach our own futures. And with your final words, I would like to conclude the session.
Oh, my final words is there is a great deal of hope and a lot of agency, but do remember that understanding change is important, and the fact that change itself is changing needs to be appreciated. And that's the essential message of Postnormal Times.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank ILEM for starting this great initiative.
I'd like to thank ILEM as well, yes.
I hope we did a good start for them. We wish them all the best, all the colleagues that helped us, and ILEM that hosted us here. And with hope and with the greatest salams, we would like to conclude this session. Thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you very much. Masalama.